Hey, welcome to the Kinda Sleepy podcast. I'm your host, Knowledge, and I got a special guest on the phone this week. Tooty, say what's up.
Hello, what's up?
You seem kind of excited to be on the podcast this week.
Man, I am excited. You never asked me to be on the podcast before. I'm excited.
Yeah, we go way back. So I'm really glad to have you on this week because a lot of what we're talking about this week is stuff that, me and you have had discussions about in the past, and I know that, you're kind of passionate about some of this, so I'm really excited to talk to you about it. So you want to jump right in?
Let's go.
Let's jump right in. Okay, so first up, pretty much the whole first half of this show could be classified under white tomfoolery and foolishness, WTF. And so this first one comes to us from, I believe it's Denton, Texas. No, Cypress, Texas. I'm sorry, Cypress, Texas, where a young lady named Shatorian Davis was, once again, this is very reminiscent of the story of Bob Marley's granddaughter. She was at an Airbnb, and she was in the neighborhood. It was a predominantly colonized neighborhood, and she was getting something out of her car. And so after she was coming back in the house, they apparently, called an off-duty police officer, a plainclothes cop, to come talk to her. And so she talked to the cop, apparently explained that she was at an Airbnb. And I guess that didn't, resonate well with the natives. And they decided to call, the police on her. And she has this video that shows cop cars lined kind of down the block. And she said there were no less than 12 police officers that came to see her for basically what she said was standing while black as she got something out of her car. So, this is an Airbnb's first scenario with this. And honestly, I want to ask you this. Do you think that there's any kind of way or rule or regulation they can put in place to stop this? I don't think so.
I mean, I don't think so. I think, what we are doing is actually getting into like the souls and the guts of people. People are calling the cops on black people, right? And at the end of the day, and it's really crazy to me when people walk around, they're like, well, I'm not a racist and I have black friends and I think that's cool. But at the end of the day, no, you have a problem and are innately afraid of people that don't look like you. Right. And, with situations like Airbnb and HomeAway and all these places, me and my friends travel a lot. And, for the most part, we are the only people of color, black people, in different venues, and it can go either way. One way could be oh, we're so excited for you to be here, and then the opposite is that, okay, I'm concerned, how are you here? And right. that goes into something deeper. That's deeper. That's a deeper issue that we got going on within our country and around the world.
Yeah, that's implicit bias at its finest. I mean, that's
all the way.
Yeah, you look at these folks and you're like, how are you able to get here because you look like you look, and right. that's just implicit bias, and we've got more stories, that talk about this as well, various things that you cannot do while black. Also, the next story, I'm a member of a fraternity, Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated. You are a member of a sorority. I don't know if you want to say your sorority. Shout your sorority out, Tooty, if you want to.
Hey, we good.
All right, we're gonna keep that on the hush.
We're gonna keep it moving.
Yeah, we're gonna keep it moving.
I love my sorority though.
Yeah, I know you do. And so, the thing is, I don't know if we mentioned this last week or not, but this week, the story comes up. I know I saw it last week, but this week, we're looking at Sigma Gamma Rho had the police called on them while they were doing a highway cleanup.
Right. Yeah, I heard about that.
You picking up trash on the side of the road, and somebody calls the cops, says that there are a group of women who are fighting. So check this out. So all right. So the state trooper apparently pulled up and asked them were they fighting. This was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Asked him were they fighting. He said, I've never seen anyone out here cleaning, and I'm responding to a call.
Wow.
Who?
That's all I got. Wow.
Yeah. Okay, and I'm looking at the picture. They had pictures of them doing the cleanup. I remember somebody posting pictures to social media. They were literally out there in their sorority, paraphernalia, and they got the cops called on them.
Right.
We can't even do community service now? What is that about?
We can't even serve you. We can't even serve you anymore. We're picking up trash because it's an eyesore for you, right? Man, when I heard that, I was just completely disgusted. First and foremost, I'm like, I've been through Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and it is very interesting that, well, I'm not surprised. How about that? I'm not surprised that happened. But what I'm way more concerned about is like, you could have either looked it up, like they had on Greek paraphernalia, like there were letters. Like I just don't understand how in the world you end up calling the police on people that are actually doing a good deed.
things in the community.
Like, it just doesn't good things in the community, and like it's so funny. Like people try to put that out there, like we don't take care of our communities, and we need other people to come do cleanup for us, and this is that. And they're like, no, like they were legitimately doing a service for everybody else. Not asked. They did it on their own. Like, that thing just disgusted me to no end. And the fact that the police responded to it and was like, okay, yeah, let me go see what's going on. That stuff is weird.
Yeah.
I think it's weird.
It's weird to people who have good sense. It's not weird to them. Like,
obviously good sense ain't happening around the world.
Yeah. I mean, if you think that you need to call the police on people cleaning up on the side of the highway, you have a problem. Like a real life honest to goodness problem, and that's something that you need to address. But the thing is, honestly, from now on, if anybody that I know calls the police on me, I'm literally going to take it as an act of violence. Like, and that's how I'm going to feel. Like, that's the only way I can feel. And it's a way I felt for a long time. And I'm glad that it's now being, one thing is I hate social media, but I love social media at the same time, because now you're able to get these incidents that we used to only talk about, and people could say, oh, whatever, that's not happening.
That doesn't exist. Right.
Yeah. Now they can't say that.
Let me show you.
Yeah. It's right there in their face. But the thing is that they even the thing is, this is what's so beautiful. I hate to use the term beautiful, but this is what's so beautiful about the structure of white privilege and white supremacy in America. This is what's so ingenious about it, is that they can even turn that off and ignore it.
Right.
Somehow we've gotten to the point where my feelings have been put on equal footing with facts. And so because I feel like it's not happening, then clearly, even though factually I can prove it, it doesn't exist. And that's what that's one of the foundational platforms of white privilege is in this country, the ability to ignore the plight of others. And that's what this is.
I agree.
I live in a predominantly white neighborhood. I have a white neighbor. I have a number of Caucasian neighbors, and I have police officers that live in this community. Actually, some of them bring their police SUVs to the community, and one is actually parked right outside of my door. And the fear that I had in my gut when I looked out my window and saw that car literally 5 feet from my door, I had to check myself. I was like, what am I doing? I've seen that car a million times, but the one time I see it parked, literally, like because this guy usually doesn't park here. The one time I see it parked 5 feet from my door, my stomach knotted up. I went into fight or flight mode. I was like, okay, so what's going to happen next? But then I was like, wait a minute. That car's empty. That car's usually here on the other side of the parking lot. Okay, relax. Yeah. But the fact that I had to talk myself down speaks volumes about our relationship as a people with law enforcement in this country. And it's sad. Right.
And it's funny. Like, I've had situations where, so I have a younger brother, and I'm very cognizant of, what I say to him when it comes to him and interacting with the police. He's young, he's got an old car, just all the stereotypical things where he's gotten pulled over before, and I'm just like, it's really crazy that I have to have this conversation with my younger brother. I've been pulled over before, and I'm like, hey, what did you pull me over for? Do I need to tell you what you can and cannot pull me over for? And I've intimidated cops before. And I granted, when I think about certain situations that have happened nationally and how things could go wrong, I just feel like at some point though, we have to stand our ground. We have to say the things that we know. I make a point, I understand white privilege, and I live very close to very wealthy, super wealthy neighborhoods. And there are areas of town where I literally go and I'm the only black person there, and I do it on purpose. Because it's like, why do you feel like you can just segregate yourself from everything else in the world? No, you are going to see me. You are going to understand that I'm here and that you can't just get away from us.
Makes me think of Ralph Ellison's The Invisible Man, which is actually one of my favorite books. And really, I mean, the thing is, they have the ability to see right through us, as if we're invisible.
Right.
And our next story, kind of proves that it doesn't matter. Like, you're a very, very, very educated woman, very talented woman, and, I have a modicum of education myself. And so the thing is, it doesn't matter how, intelligent you are, how articulate you are.
Right.
Your education, your articulate nature, your career won't save you. That's why I'm so over, like, respectability politics. When somebody tells me, well, if black men will pull their pants up, sir.
All right. No.
Sir.
No.
Sir.
No.
Let me tell you what's not going to happen right there. That's not going to stop anybody. If all black people in the world pulled their pants up and wore belts for the rest of their life, that would still not stop what's going on right now in America. And so there's a story that was in the Washington Post a couple of years back. This is a story actually from 2015, and I just found it again today. Not today, this week. And we posted it this week. And there was a young lady, her name is Faye Wells. And she was the vice president of strategy at a company in California. And her educational pedigree, was phenomenal. She went to Duke for undergrad, had an MBA from Dartmouth. You got an Ivy League MBA. Right. You're vice president of strategy for a multinational corporation. And she gets locked out of her Santa Monica home where she calls the locksmith. The locksmith lets her in, clearly. Right. And she said she was, she heard voices outside of her door. She looked out the window and saw a man with a gun. And then the cops, basically ordered her to come out with her hands up in her own place because her neighbor called 911. They had dispatched 19 officers for this 5'7", 125-pound woman. Now, that's crazy to me. And so she asked the police for, the names of the officers that were there. She asked them, and they gave her, a bunch of false names.
Of course they did.
And the Washington Post did their due diligence, and, they nothing ever happened. The police chief didn't really handle the situation the way it was supposed to be handled. And when she went and asked her white neighbor who called the police on him why he called, he was like, I didn't know. Do you know your neighbor? She was like, yeah, and started rattling off information about her neighbor. And then he was visibly upset. And so he said, well, I'm an attorney, so you can go fuck yourself. That cavalier attitude. See, now at that point,
right.
That's what they would have needed the cops for right there. Because the moment you say that, we about to have an assault and battery. I'm whooping your whole entire ass. That's just what the reality
straight up.
is.
No, straight up. So I was thinking, because at first, before you even said that she went and talked to her neighbor, I would have sent him a fruit basket saying, fuck you. Because, how do you not know me? Right? The handwritten note and everything. Real classy about it. Fuck you. Are you kidding? Really? Why would you, why don't you know me? That says a lot about you.
Tooty, that speaks volumes.
Man, that says a lot about you. She can sit there and tell you every single neighbor. She probably knew who he was. Well, there are probably many times that she's probably either saw him and said hello, and he just gave him one of them smug looks like they do. Right. But
here's another story that actually turned out pretty good. Michael Hayes, he's an inspector. He's a building. He's from Memphis, Tennessee. And he owns a company that I'm pretty sure flips houses, and it's an investment property that he was going to look at and inspect, and he had a right to do that. And the neighbor of this house that he purchased, had a contract on, comes out and says something, demands to know what he's doing. He showed her the investment contract, and she called the police anyway. Now in this case, the police were actually on Michael's side. It was crazy. And so she gets to barking at the police. He said, and the police officer says, keep the camera, because the guy had his camera out. He had his phone out, doing the camera, videotaping the encounter. He says, you keep the camera rolling, and if you have any problems with her, call me back over here, and she'll go to jail for that. The woman says,
Right.
I'm friends with the sheriff. And the cop snaps back to her, I don't care if you're friends with the president. You're going to let him do what he's going to do. And if you try to do anything to stop to him, I'm going to take you to jail. And I'm like, yeah.
I love it.
And so then he said, so the lady says, hurry up, do it, and get out. And then the black female said, no, he can take his time. And then the other, and the white guy officer says he can take all day if he wants to. So I
like this story.
Yeah, this guy, his name's Michael. Michael then says, hey, I would rather you guys like stay here while I do my inspection, just in case she tries to come over and, do something to me. And they was like, yeah, we'll definitely do that. We'll stick around. And so, he does the inspection while Karen is sitting over there seething, with her raisins and the potato salad. And, Karen. And so she's sitting over there seething, and he finishes his inspection. And when he comes out, he says, he thanks the officers and everything like that, and for sticking up for him. And he took pictures with him, took selfies with him. And, he said, at the end of the day, he said, what, the lady called the police on me. But she didn't want me in the neighborhood. The police, they were on my side. I'm happy to be going home now. I'm finna go home and see my wife. I'm about to hug her. I'm about to see my son, maybe see another day, and then go to jail.
Right.
That part to me, while I like the story, that part to me was so sad. That after an encounter with, because these encounters, like, I hate to say it, but most people of color in this country have had these encounters where one wrong move and it could have very well ended in a fatality. It could have very well ended on the completely opposite end of the spectrum. Right. And justice would not have been served. And we know that. We've reconciled ourselves to that fact. And it's sad. It's a very sad reality. But
and
that's how
almost
we live.
desensitize ourselves to it as well. Like when things are happening now, like there are still things happening across the country. Like all these articles that you're listing off, like, where is the fight now? Like, I feel like we get so easily distracted when it comes to all these other issues happening, or, somebody kneeling or somebody sending a tweet. Like, we have legitimate issues happening, and our young men and women are not only getting killed or beaten or whatever, and we are not doing anything about it. We're just so focused on all these other things. Like, we have the ability to actually make change happen and force people outside of their bias to do what's right by us.
We don't.
And I just get so.
My reality. I honestly have come to the realization that we don't want to. And this is crazy.
And that's sad. That kills me.
Yeah,
that's sad.
This is crazy. Like, it's just, and the reality of it is, it took, like, I always would joke about being retired and saying, I really just didn't want to deal with this stuff anymore, and just, I'm just kind of burying my head in the sand and protecting my family. But if there's one thing that Kanye's, I don't care what it was, Kanye's stupidity between Kanye and R. Kelly, which we're gonna touch on R. Kelly a little bit in a minute. But between Kanye and R. Kelly this past, like, last week or so, what was it, last week before last?
Yeah.
I said let me know exactly how broken we are as a community.
Right.
For us to rush to rationalize that stupid statement and try to, Monday morning quarterback the context of it, and for us to continue caping for literally what we've watched, 20 years of predatory evolution, 30 years of predatory evolution, really, for us to cape for that, for us to ignore the facts about Bill Cosby and continue saying, well, all that stuff from 30 years ago. No, nigga, like, are you, what is wrong with you,
blaming
Negroes?
the victim, or even blaming the victim. Like, I was in a situation and talking to older family members, female family members, and, well, they knew what they were doing when they were going over there at midnight. I was like, yo, I don't think they thought that they was going to take K.L.U.B and be, like, knocked out, like, and like, woke up and not know what happened to them. I just don't think that. And regardless of if that was the case or not, like, no woman should have to feel like, well, I'm going to a man's house and I should, like I should feel like this is happening to me and this is okay because I put myself in that position. Like, I think that's ridiculous.
And then when they try to equivocate it, the thing that gets me is they try to equivocate it. Like, so you ain't never drank with a young lady and then did something?
Sorry. Oh my God.
Alcohol and a literal medical sedative are two different things. So you ain't never smoked with a girl? Again, marijuana and a literal medical sedative are two different things. And number one, if I give you alcohol or if I give you marijuana, you are thereby choosing to indulge in that. Now, if I slip something in it or lie to you about something I'm giving you, if I give you a K.L.U.B and tell you it's an X pill, that's still rape. That is still rape.
Period.
Because you have knowingly accepted the substance of alcohol. You have knowingly accepted the substance of marijuana. If I give you an X pill, you are knowingly accepting taking that X pill and the way that your body feels because you may know how ecstasy makes you feel. Giving you a medical sedative and then violating your body is something completely different because what you're telling me is that you're giving me something that makes me not remember. Now, if I drink till I black out, that's one thing. That means I am overindulging in alcohol and I'm blacking out. But even if I give a woman alcohol and she overindulges and blacks out, that means I can't get consent from her to have any sort of sexual activity with her.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, okay, y'all, like, dudes over there, if guys are literally having, like, relations with women and they're passed out, like, y'all are the scum of the earth. Like,
you trash.
Super scum of the earth. And, like, I'm just saying, you straight up trash. You're garbage. So
let's not get off on that tangent. Let's come back to that in a second. I got a couple more stories.
Hold on.
I got a couple more stories before we get to that. So this next story comes from Alabama.
They still garbage though.
They still trash. This next story comes from Alabama, Trussville, Alabama to be specific. And this young man went into Hobby Lobby with a receipt to return some items that he no longer needed or wanted or whatever. The items were still new. The box was just open. The manager at Hobby Lobby calls the police on him while having him wait while they do the return. And said to him, well, I got to call the corporate office. So the officer comes up to him and asks him for his ID. The officer says, the guy says, for what? Officer says, you about to be trespassed from the store. So he gives him the ID. The officer walks off and runs his ID. He comes back, says nothing, goes over to speak to the manager. And the manager does the return and gives him his cash back. Now, the video that accompanies this, the manager has an attitude. Like, the manager really has an attitude. And the guy is understandably upset about having the police called on him, while he's just trying to simply return an item to Hobby Lobby with the receipt. Mm-hmm. And so she says, if he wants to get loud, I can call the police again, have him come back over here. So you're threatening this man again with police action because he's understandably upset by your actions. And the woman that's taking the video, his wife, is calmly asking her, why'd you call the police? He's very calm. And then he was like, the guy actually, and you can hear him in the background, but he wasn't even like blanking or nothing like that. And the woman explains to the manager, his voice carries. He's a man. But you can understand why he's upset, basically. Like, come on, dog.
Why is she so intimidated?
Right. I'm like, so this man, and being from Alabama, I know what Trussville is. I used to work over in Trussville. I used to work actually not too far from this Hobby Lobby. And I'm like, come on, dog. Like, it's enough black people in that area for you to not be so nervous where you got to call the police on a guy who legitimately has a return. Like, and I used to work in retail. So it's crazy. It's crazy.
I just don't understand that. Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, none of that makes sense to me. Like, he had a whole receipt. Like, it was legitimate. I'm trying to figure out what was the problem. Like, and where's the customer service? Like, you sitting there calling the cops on somebody? I pray to God they took her job. Like, seriously.
I do too.
And please don't be around people ever.
Yeah, that's weak. Like, that's weak sauce for real.
It is. It's all weak sauce.
So, continuing with our theme of having the police called on you, T.I. got arrested. Tip got arrested.
This was good. Tip was just trying to go home.
Right. Tip was like, man, I'm trying to get in the house, man. I pay you. He's a security guard. That's the truth.
Right.
His homeowners association fees, probably which are in the thousands of dollars, really probably do pay this security guard salary, and the security guard was allegedly asleep. And then even when Tiny comes up there and says, yo, he lives here, security guard still called the police. And then the police was like, you was acting a fool, and said he was intoxicated. The video that I saw from the surveillance camera in the police station, T.I. was clearly not intoxicated. I don't care what nobody say. T.I. was clearly not intoxicated. Like, you know, if T.I. makes a song called Disregard the Constabulary, because, you know, he like to use big words now, you know, I'm really going to laugh.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he has a vast vocabulary. Right.
Here's my question, though. Like, I listen to I'm Serious all the time, right? Like, I still listen to old T.I.
Right.
I'm trying to figure out where T.I. get all these big words from. Like, when he got locked up for that little bit, did he read, like, the whole dictionary?
Man, he was reading the whole dictionary.
Trying to tell you. T.I. was like, man, let me get this articulate stuff going on. I love it.
Wait a minute.
Because T.I. was like, I'm trying to ask you a
Got
question.
his law degree.
Right. He one of them dudes got that jailhouse law degree. But he was like, you know, I'm trying to ask you a question. He said, you know, I would like to get an answer. He said, how about you ask me in court? He said, well, shoot. All right, then you're going to be talking to the lawyer. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. If I'm that cop in that situation, I would much rather talk to T.I. than whoever this millionaire has as a lawyer. I know lawyers.
Right.
I know lawyers. And once you get on their bad side, if they're an officer of the court and you've done some improprieties, they're going to find all the dirt. And they're going to drag you all the way over the coals and put all of that on the record. And if it's bad enough, every single arrest you've had from that point will be in question. Period. So I would much rather answer the question to T.I. than I would to the lawyer. I probably wouldn't have taken him to jail. I'm like, sir, do you live here? Do you live in this community?
Right.
Why won't you let him in this community? And he lives here. Are you serious? Like, at what point do officers have?
Wasn't it a black man though? Like, can we talk about that?
Yeah. It was a black guy that was a security guard.
It was a black guy. Like, first of all, how do you not know T.I.?
Here's my question. At what point do the police have an obligation or responsibility to de-escalate and use common sense in certain situations? Like, if you're a police officer and you're called to a gated community by a security guard, and there's a man there with his wife saying, hey, we live here. We have keys. I clearly live here. She clearly lives here. And this guy's not letting us in. At what point do you tell the security guard, hey, why aren't you letting him in? If it's that deep, what we'll do, we'll hop on your little funky golf cart and we'll ride down here to the house, see if he actually lives here.
Right.
And at that point, I'm mad at you for wasting my time and wasting everybody's time.
Man, I think about stuff like this all the time. And, we come with all these solutions, right? Like, all of us do. Like, I think about 99% of the time that I see things happening. I'm like, you could have done this a different way. But what's crazy is we talk about this whole common sense thing. Like, sense is not common.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that played out specifically in that instance. Like, this man's wife literally was saying, like, this is my husband, let him in. But, and I think it was a little gangster, though, that T.I. came back. Because I would have came back, too.
Yeah.
When I would have gotten the house, I came back. Like, dude, like, first of all, know who I am.
Right.
Please.
Right.
Like, know who I am. And,
right.
Hey. And honestly, I don't know. I might have wanted to hit him, too.
Right. So.
I'm just saying. I'm just being
all right.
honest.
So, this next story, and, this is actually a personal friend of mine that this happened to. And it happened to her at the Hyatt Centric in the French Quarters in New Orleans.
Mm.
So she was staying there for the BCS playoffs. Because she's a football fan. Her sister went to Bama with me. And they were there for the BCS playoffs. So she says, here's what happened. I entered the lobby, batch, around 11:30 a.m. and took a seat at the lobby restaurant, the lobby restaurant batch, around 11:30 a.m. and took a seat at the table close to the television alongside the window. The bartender looked over but never greeted me or brought me a menu. Besides this being an unacceptable service, it didn't prepare me for what was yet to come. I stayed and continued watching ESPN. There were several white patrons throughout the restaurant. Quite some time later, I stood up to look out the window at all the activity in the heart of the French Quarters, and the wind was ferociously blowing and small flurries began to fall. I enjoyed watching it. At this point, I still hadn't been greeted. A tall, wide-bodied white male appeared next to me, extremely close to me, literally shoulder to shoulder. I became extremely uncomfortable, especially because there's so much space in this restaurant available. I then turned sideways to face him and said, "Hey, how's it going?" He too turned his body and then he glared at me. That's when I saw his name tag, Douglas. He didn't have a standard uniform on, so just from my extensive hospitality background, I assumed he was a manager and or in a department such as engineering. He continued to glare at me and walked away. Moments later, I turn around and there's now two men approaching me. This time it was Douglas and a man named Javier, who appeared to be security. He immediately asked me assertively, "Are you a guest here?" Patrons and guests outside of the restaurant in the lobby area began to look in our direction. I replied, "Is there a reason why you're asking me if I'm a guest in this public hotel space?" He says it louder, "Are you a guest here?" I responded, "Yes, I am. And again, is there a reason you're asking me if I'm a guest in a public space and not asking anyone else?" Douglas then fades into the background. There was silence. All eyes from the lobby and inside the restaurant are still in our direction. The hotel was busy this particular weekend due to the NCAA football BCS playoffs. It was pretty active. "What room are you in?" For my own confidentiality, I gave him my last name instead of my room number and then asked him again what reason he had to inquire whether I was a guest. He waves his hands in an up and down motion from my head to toe and says, "You look out of it." His response completely threw me off. I replied, "Excuse me?" He repeats it, including the hand-waving up and down motion. I ask him to explain to me precisely what that means. Silence. I requested he point me in the direction of someone who can explain what exactly that means since he was incapable or unwilling to do so. It was such a scene from the restaurant to the lobby. We go to the front desk. Javier and Douglas are now both present. Stephanie, the front desk manager, confirms to Javier that I am indeed a guest, and furthermore, the reservation was a Hyatt Global Status reservation. I then tell her what just transpired. She looked mortified. I requested the GM and was advised that he was off property. I told them to contact him right away and have him call me.
Right.
Instead of the GM, Travis Teague contacted me, the manager of food and beverage. Instead of the GM at the time, Travis Teague contacted me. The director of food and beverage, Ray Gill, reached out hours later and advised he would be next in the chain of command present on property and suggest we meet in the lobby. Fast forward a little bit. He agreed that both Javier and Douglas were wrong and unprofessional. Then he went on to say, and I quote from my notes that day and memory, "I don't think it's racial profiling because I don't like to accept that these kinds of things happen." I quickly responded, "Ray, just because we don't like to accept that things happen doesn't stop them from happening and it being a reality for some people." I was so mortified that someone in a direct leadership position would be so dismissive and unprofessional. He then goes on to say, "The only reason I could think of for why this happened is that our hotel is located in a very urban area. Sometimes we get homeless people that wander in off the streets onto our property." I responded, "Ray, you just confirmed that I was profiled. What's your GM's name? Please have him contact me. Thank you." Ray called me about 4 hours later and said, "I just wanted to let you know I'm leaving for the day, but I did email Travis and I called him twice and was unable to reach him. Hopefully he calls me back." I said to Ray, "You report directly to Travis. If there were a fire in the hotel, you'd be able to reach him. Treat this like a fire." The following day, I checked out and inquired once more about Travis, the general manager, because I wanted someone to take ownership of what happened. I departed the property and I was told both Travis and Ray were unavailable. It wasn't for another 5 months that this young lady got a response from the GM. They changed GMs. The new GM seemed to be more interested in where she lived than actually what happened and what transpired. It was just the whole thing. It happens to all of us. And I looked at the pictures that she posted along with the story. She didn't look homeless. whatsoever.
at all.
This is,
I was like, no. I was like, wait a minute. Looks homeless. I was like, what was her membership? She had like one
like
of those
Hyatt Global.
preferred memberships.
Yeah.
Right. Like, are you kidding me?
It was trash. Pure
It's
inexplainable trash. And I'm just like, are you serious? Like, this is what's going on. Like, this how we getting down these days.
Right.
So.
Right.
I mean, I don't really have much to say about it.
No, you can't. There's not much to say about that. And honestly, I hope she, like, this is just a sidebar. Like, I really hope she pursued that to, like, the actual corporate level.
Oh, she's doing that. Like, she's going in. Like, that's why she posted it.
Ridiculous.
Because she's going in. And a lot of her friends, a lot of us are like, yo, this is trash. We keep tagging Hyatt. As you can see, we're talking about it here on this podcast so that more people become aware of what happened. The Hyatt Centric in the French Quarter in New Orleans. Yes, that's where it is.
Yeah.
And that's just trash. I mean, that hotel room is $600-something a night. A night. But she look homeless. Right. And you verify that she's a guest there.
She looks homeless.
If you don't get your...
Right.
Yeah. That's wild.
That's crazy.
So,
that's crazy.
Moving on to the next story. This one was kind of sad. This guy, Jonathan Scott from Alabama, he's been called the George Zimmerman of Alabama for what happened. And I hate that comparison. This guy's 52 years old, Jonathan Scott. He shot 16-year-old Mustafa Bearfield. He was convicted of manslaughter. And so here's the story. Around 7 a.m. on June 16, 2016, he was making a delivery in his bread truck in Huntsville, Alabama, when he noticed the door of his truck was open. Scott said he noticed Mustafa walking away with his black lunchbox. He said after yelling for the boy to drop the lunchbox, he said the young man responded by giving him a screw you look. That's in quotes. That's a direct quote. He said he told him, drop it or I'll shoot. When Mustafa didn't comply and began to run, Scott shot at the teen and missed. And so he shot again and again and again. He fired 6 rounds. That 6th round is what what hit Mustafa in the back of his head as he was running away. His defense attorneys argued that he was only trying to scare the teenager, but you don't
by shooting him.
Six rounds. You send 6 rounds downrange at somebody's body. You're not trying to scare them. You're trying to kill them, period.
You're trying to kill them.
I don't believe in warning shots, but I also don't believe in sending 6 warning shots downrange at somebody's body. But what I was taught with a firearm is that whenever you point a firearm in a certain direction, you need to be ready to destroy whatever that thing is pointed at. That includes a human life. And so the thing is, for him to send 6 rounds downrange at this 16-year-old boy, yes, the child was wrong for allegedly stealing his lunchbox. But you mean to tell me that this little boy died over an unseasoned turkey sandwich and some potato salad with raisins in it? Man, fuck out of here. Like, you must be out your mind. And I especially resent the George Zimmerman comparison because it implies that Trayvon Martin was engaged in criminal activity when he was stalked and accosted. When he was stalked and accosted by this grown punk who's still out here committing crimes. And so I hate that this man is being called George Zimmerman because you have to equivocate that to Trayvon as well. And so I'm glad that this sorry motherfucker, excuse my language, I'm trying to stop cussing. That's one of my new things. I'm trying to stop saying the N-word.
Yeah,
I'm trying to stop cussing. It's not really working for me with the way things are going in society right now. And so I'm glad this sorry bastard is behind bars, and I hope he never sees the light of day. And I hope one of Mustafa's cousins in there that don't really care
they find his ass.
is in the cell with him. I hope they send this dude to Holman Correctional Facility in Atmore, Alabama, where they've been having riots. I hope they send him there. I hope they send him there. I want him to be there, and I want him to feel. I don't want him to die. I want him to feel pain for the rest of his life, the same as this child's mother is going to feel. Period. So, this dude, fuck him. I hope all the bad things in life happen to him and only him.
Okay, ditto. Damn.
So, next up, I don't know if you saw this video. It was a video this week that made me smile. And there's a video of this young lady, this young white woman in Washington, D.C., who is being arrested. And she's kicking the police officers, and the officers are just like, yo, you need to get relaxed. And so it's this young white woman, Karen. I'm going to call her Karen. I don't really know her name. But, yeah, so she was arrested because she kept yelling, "I tried to pet your dog," because she allegedly was trying to pet this black woman's dog without her permission. So at first I was like, well, that's a little extreme. So I figured there had to be more to the story. Well, there is. Here's the story. So the young black lady says this. She says, and I got this from Very Smart Brothers. Shout out to Damon Young and the whole crew of Very Smart Brothers. Says, I was going to a bar in Adams Morgan, which is an area of D.C., to pick my boyfriend up from work. I do this often, and I always bring my dog. She's not the first white person to try to do this. Most people walk away when they get denied, though. She reached her hand into my car, reaching over my boyfriend who was trying to block access. I rolled the window up. She's still at my car trying to tell me to let her interact with my dog. She said, and I quote, "I have a connection with the animal." I got out of my car and I told her to keep it moving. She refused, getting more belligerent and irate. She then says, "You want to fight?" and throws her bag at my car. At this point, the police intervene because they've been observing from across the street the whole time. There's usually police posted up in this area, so she really should have known better. They were just going to detain her, but her own actions got her hemmed up. So, first of all, here's what stuck out to me. Most people walk away when they get denied, though. So we just walking up to people's cars and trying to pet their dogs.
Right.
What kind of foolishness is that? But this lady reached in her car across a whole Negro male in an attempt to reach this dog because she, quote, has a connection with the animal, end quote. Who raised these people?
No, I don't know. Where are these boundaries? Like, there are boundaries. Like, you don't, I mean, it's one of those things like, you know, there's a thing called personal space. And I just don't understand how in the world that happened. Like, she literally reached into a car that wasn't her own, and they had no prior relationship. Didn't know this person.
Who raised you people that are reaching in folks' cars? Like it's okay.
But let's flip it though. What if it was a black person reaching into your car?
I'm probably gonna do the same thing. Hey, keep it moving, bro. What the hell is wrong with you? Who raised you?
No. I'm saying if it was white people in a car and black people reaching into the car.
Yeah.
It's a completely different response.
Yeah.
Completely different response.
Yeah.
But we don't do stuff like that.
That's not
we got
even
home training.
We got home training. Speaking of people who don't have home training, Apple Music has followed Spotify. Apple Music and Pandora has followed Spotify, and they will no longer promote R. Kelly's music. Now, when this got posted on the page, people were like, they're discriminating against R. Kelly. I do not understand why people are trying to make R. Kelly some civil rights hero. Like, this is so freaking ridiculous. R. Kelly, they discriminate against R. Kelly. This is wrong.
R. Kelly been peeing on little girls. Are you kidding
me? Like, what is wrong with you people?
Are you kidding me?
Here's my thing. And this is another reason. This is like one of the major reasons I gave up on us. Because the thing is, at what point does R. Kelly, why is he entitled to? Why does he have the right to? Why is it discrimination when he's not put on a playlist? He's not entitled to that. That is a choice. People are choosing. That is a luxury. It is a fringe benefit, a privilege. Right. Discrimination is something that you have a right to. For example, if I am standing on a sidewalk, I have a right to be on that sidewalk. When you make a law or when you tell me I can't be on that sidewalk because X, Y, Z, then you have discriminated against me.
Right.
But if I'm making music and your company says, hey, I'm not going to put your music on my playlist. Okay, well, are you still selling my music? Right. Because then at that point, if you're selling everybody else's music, but you're not selling my music, or you're not making my music available, even though you're making everybody else's music available, then I have a case for discrimination. But I can't force you to promote me or anybody else. Matter of fact, I'm going to post a song on Spotify and Apple Music that I made. And when they don't put me on the playlist, I'm not going to say that's discrimination. Do you know how many artists are not on Apple Music, Spotify, and all these other playlists? A lot. A lot. So, yeah, no. Y'all can kick rocks with that noise. I'm personally, I'm glad that R. Kelly is not on these playlists. I'm glad that, people aren't he's not getting extra income from the streams and none of that. Personally, I just want R. Kelly to fade to black and disappear forever.
Right.
Like Cardi B said, forever.
All the chapters.
Yeah.
All the chapters.
I hope somebody traps him in a closet and welds it shut so that he can't get out. For real. Right.
No, because I'm sorry, that brother's got issues. And, what's really crazy to me is that we sit there and we allow, I've heard in different places, people are still playing R. Kelly's music. Kanye West went on this freaking rant, which was ridiculous. And they started deleting him out of songs. But R. Kelly still got Step in the Name of Love playing every, 4 or 5 hours on the radio station. Yeah.
Happy people, all that.
I think we got issues.
I was at a function.
Why are we still playing his music?
I was at a function the other week, and I was, one thing about me is that I'm very cognizant of music when it comes on because I absolutely love music. And every song that came on, I'm jamming, singing along, two-stepping this and the third. And then I heard Step in the Name of Love came on, and I'm not going to tell somebody what they can and can't play in their house. I can't control what music plays on your playlists or on your, random shuffle settings or whatever. What I can do is control how I respond to it. As soon as I heard it, I got sick to my stomach and I went and sat down. I literally went and sat down. Like the very sound of his voice makes me sick. So.
Yeah, me too.
I just.
Same here.
And for all y'all out here talking about,
and the fact that he's selling out on in concerts, that people are like, we gotta go. I'm like, why?
A litmus. Honestly, and this is going to be, fellas. If you listen to me, if you hear my voice, and you love yourself, and you love black women, this is a litmus test for who you need to date and marry. Ask her how she feels about R. Kelly, and if she still listens, leave. Leave her alone. Don't date her.
Crazy. Crazy. Set you up.
Right.
Crazy.
Right. Well, moving right along. Meek Mill. Shout out to Meek.
Oh, Meek Mill.
Free
Meek.
Yeah, I'm so glad he's free. I'm actually free. My thing is I want that same energy. I wish we could put that same energy into freeing all these other folks, such as Pedro Hernandez in New York. He's on Rikers Island.
Yeah.
I really wish that we could work to free Pedro Hernandez. But back to Meek, though. Meek Mill was scheduled to visit the White House to discuss prison reform. And the big homie, Hov, Jay-Z, Sean, Beyonce's husband, Carter, called Meek and was like, yo, that's not a good look, bruh.
Don't go, bruh.
Yeah, don't go. I mean, you see what happened to Kanye. You see what happened to Steve Harvey. Don't go, bro. Don't do it. You don't want to do that, bro. Don't do it.
Kanye got hypnotized. Don't do it.
Hey, don't be that next contestant on that Summer Jam screen, dog. Don't do it. But that's really how it went.
He kept run.
Right. So I don't know, man. That's wild. That's wild to me.
Yeah.
So. Shout out to Jay-Z. Shout out. Everybody needs a big homie, in my opinion. I think everybody needs a big bro or a mentor of some sort. So that's what's up. I'm glad Jay-Z did that. And we almost coming up on the end of the show, but we got one last topic. And I think you know what that is.
Uh-oh.
Pastor Michael R. Jordan of New Era Baptist Church last week posted a sign that said black folks need to stay out of white churches.
White churches.
Now, I'm going to tell y'all.
What the other side say? What the other side say?
I forgot what. Hold on. I got it right here. Wait a minute. Let me see. Let me get it.
Yeah, the other side was good too.
Shoot. Let's see. I got it here somewhere. I got it. Okay. It said. No, not that. Dang. Okay. So here's the other side. It says, white folks refuse to be our neighbors. Now, check this out. Check this out. So, in preparation for this episode, I take this show fairly seriously. You know, in preparation for this episode, I did something today that I have not done. I want to say I've only done like maybe once or twice before. I went to a predominantly white church.
Okay.
I did that today. You know, people call them multicultural or mixed race churches or whatever. I don't know what they call them, but there were a number of black people in this predominantly white church, but it's still a predominantly white church. Of course, you know. So I've been to a couple. I think I know there was a church I went to in Birmingham called the Love Church. I believe that was called the Love Church. And then so the church that I went to here is called Elevation. And Elevation has a number of different campuses around the city, you know, and they've got other campuses, you know, in other areas of the region and the country, and they have people who watch their services, you know, from all over the globe. Like they had somebody watch from Dubai today. You know, they mentioned that on the second stream because when I came home, I watched the stream after I went to the church because I wanted to see what the difference was in the experiences, watching it at home or actually being in the congregation. And so the thing is, you know, one thing about me, I'm a preacher's kid. I love the Bible. I am a Christian. I'm one of them cussing Christians, as they call them.
Yeah, me too.
So the thing is, I went to the church, and you know, I'm growing up in the black church. You know, there are certain things that I'm used to and that I'm accustomed to. And one thing I noticed that everybody at the church was friendly, and I was like, okay, I mean that's cool. You know, I kind of expected that. You know, church. I feel like people should be friendly in church. You know, but when I'm in a new setting, especially when I'm uncomfortable, you know, I'm not necessarily antisocial, but my guard is up. And so I understood, you know, my guard was up, so I tried to be friendly. And so everything was cool. The praise and worship was actually pretty dope. Like, I have an eclectic sense of music, musical taste. And the praise and worship was pretty dope, except for the person next to me who clapped on the 1 and 3. I did not understand how they was clapping on the 1 and 3. It was messing me up. I just put my hands in my pocket and smiled because I was like, you know, that clapping on the 1 and 3 stuff, you're going to get me mixed up and confused, and the ancestors will not strike me down for committing the sin of clapping on the 1 and 3. So, but I listened to the sermon. The sermon was pretty dope. I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of a Bible snob. I'm a scripture snob. I hate to use the term snob. I like to say, well, what I like to say is that when people preach to me, I prefer kind of like Bishop Noel Jones, how he goes in depth with certain stuff, like really, really deep. Like he uses a lot of big words, but he will break down what those big words mean a lot of times in his sermons. And so I like the depth of a sermon. You know, I don't, but the thing is, the sermon was a little broad. It was a little surface level for my taste, but it hit enough solid points wrapped in scripture that were verified by scripture for me to still enjoy it. So I was like, okay, and maybe a church of that size has to kind of be a little bit broad like that, and maybe a little surface level. And maybe I don't know enough about the church to know like exactly what they do in their small group study sessions and things of that nature, because a lot of churches are doing these small Bible study groups where you get the real in-depth meat of the scripture. And so, you know, the fellowship part is really what more of the service is about. So I went to the church service and I walked away. I had a good feeling about it. I would definitely visit again. And so, but the thing is, at the same time, when I look at churches like that, like large churches, I like to also understand what they're doing in the community. And so, while Pastor Jordan at New Era Baptist Church put these signs up, it wasn't that I disagreed with him. I don't necessarily disagree wholeheartedly with the premise that black people need to stay out of white churches. And the reason I don't necessarily disagree with that premise is because of what was on the other side of that sign. And when it said that white folks didn't want to be our neighbors. He said, no, white folks refused to be our neighbors, which in a lot of cases is true. That's why we have white flight. That's why we have gentrification, things of that nature. So I completely understand that particular point. The thing I've always struggled with going to, especially right now, because I now have a litmus test for this. Before, I didn't necessarily have a full-on litmus test, but I have a full-on litmus test now. What we have talked about for like the past 2 years is that, you know, these evangelicals have talked about morals and principles and being Christ-like and the Bible, and they called President Obama the Antichrist and called him a Muslim and all these things, even though they condemned his black pastor, Reverend Dr.
Right.
Jeremiah Wright. And then they turn around and they praise and support and excuse Trump at every single turn. And so my thing is, my litmus test is and has always been in this new era. If I'm sitting in church, am I sitting next to somebody praising and worshiping who, if I was shot by a cop tomorrow, or I was the victim of some unfortunate circumstance, would they try to justify or rationalize my death or prosecution, number one? And number two, am I sitting next to somebody who doesn't care enough about who I am as a human being, who doesn't look at me in love enough to not do that and support somebody who supports the mass marginalization of people that look like me? Because the thing is, and shout out to Pastor Mike for this. Me and him going to talk again next week. We're going to do a special episode next week with me and him on it, where we talk about, he taught me this, and I never looked at it this way. He said, in reality, Jesus only told us to do two things. When they came to Jesus and said, out of all the commandments, which is the greatest? He said, love the Lord thy God with all your heart. And then he said, love thy neighbors, love thyself. Those are the only two things Jesus quite literally told us to do.
Right.
That's the only two things he commanded us to do. And so the thing is, when you look at me, like, we can sit here in this church and in this building and sing all these wonderful songs glorifying God. And we can talk about how heaven will be, a mixture of different people, creeds, backgrounds, beliefs, all this stuff. We can talk about all that. But if you, sir, sitting next to me, or if you, ma'am, sitting next to me, don't love me enough as a person to see beyond my skin and actually help me stop this racism and marginalization that happens to me, and even acknowledge the fact that I'm here. If you don't even acknowledge the fact that I'm going through something, or I have this pain that I live with every day, if you can't love me enough to even see me that way, how can I believe anything that's coming out of your mouth?
Right.
How can I believe that your praise is genuine?
I want to interject a little bit, because I think a lot of that, I agree with you with the person sitting right next to you, but being a person and understanding leadership thought, a lot of that comes from the pulpit.
Yeah.
And you've got all these pastors that are in these very massive churches. And when it comes to these issues that are facing a good number of their community, like their congregants, and they are Black people or people of color, and that you don't address it on Sunday because it's controversial, that says something about you and your ministry. And I like, what the pastor said, it was divisive, but it brought attention to things that we're not looking to. Like, I have a lot of friends that go to a lot of different mega churches, and the majority of the time it is a white pastor or someone that's not of their race. But if they're not on Sunday addressing your issues and talking to you and speaking to what really is affecting you every day, that says something about your position within that church. It also says something about what they are really set out to do. So, of course, when you see that person sitting next to you and you're having to ask that question, but that directly goes to the head first.
That's real. That's real. That's real. There's man, the movie that came to mind when I thought about this whole scenario, the movie was Blood Done Signed My Name. Do you remember that movie? It had Nate Parker in it. It was about Dr. Benjamin Chavis and about his work as a teacher in New York. Mm-hmm. And it was also followed a white pastor who was sent to this area at the same time. And it was in 1970, and it talks about basically what I consider a lynching of a Black Vietnam vet, and the acquittal of the suspects. And this was a United Methodist Church that they were at, and so he invited a Black pastor to come preach at this white church. And this pastor, this white pastor, supported civil rights and was run out of the church for his support of civil rights. Now, the pastor in the movie had to get up there, and the first thing he did was tell a joke to disarm the people. And he didn't even really talk about race. He talked about Jesus. Here's my thing. And this is, I've been, for lack of a better phrase, crucified sometimes for believing this. But I truly do believe this. I do believe that if Jesus were here today, he would be what folks call a social justice warrior, number one.
Right. I agree.
They say it with disdain, but I see it as a badge of honor in that regard. Another thing that I say, and this is something I firmly believe, and this is something I read, a theology of black liberation by the late great Dr. James H. Cone. He said that any theology that does not teach, preach, and espouse liberation, this is not a direct quote. He said that any theology that does not teach, preach, and espouse liberation is not a true theology of Jesus Christ.
Right.
Because he came so that you may be free. And if it's not liberating people, from their bondage, from their shackles of racism, from the shackles of prejudice, from the shackles of hatred, from all these painful places and things that we've held on to, if it's not liberating the people, then it's not a true gospel of Jesus Christ. It's only making you feel comfortable in the sin that you currently live in. And if you live a pious life, but yet do not love your brother, then are you really living the gospel?
Right.
And so now the thing is, the only problem, and we're going to say this and wrap up because I want to get your thoughts on this. The only problem I had with him posting this sign was the context around which it was posted. The reason this sign got posted, and he's known for doing some controversial stuff on those Constantly podcast, we posted a lot of the different signs that he's put up before in the past. But the reason he posted this is because there's a predominantly white church moving into the area, and he's uncomfortable with it. But my question is, I'm not cool with him doing that, because I felt like he was taking a shot at the predominantly white church instead of focusing on his congregants.
Right.
I've never liked going to church and seeing a pastor talk about other pastors. I got an issue with that. I
agree.
I'd be like, hey, bruh, this ain't East Coast versus West Coast. You ain't Biggie and he ain't Pop. So I'm gonna need y'all to stop all this banging from the pulpit. You know what I'm saying? Right. So that was my only real issue with it. But I think it's a conversation that does need to happen, and I think it's a conversation that white people need to be sitting down and talking about. The first thing that the first thing I noticed a lot of black people did was go, like, a lot of people didn't give this man the same benefit of the doubt that they gave Kanye.
Right.
They didn't critically analyze his point. They just immediately condemned him. But some of these same folks was like, well, Kanye just a free thinker and he's so deep. Bro, if you had analyzed this one, you probably would have seen where you kind of agree with his premise, but not his point.
Right.
So, I don't know. What you think?
No, I mean, I agree with you. I look at it like, when I see people do stuff like that, I see it as attention seeking, and that's what we did. We gave him the attention that's why he does it, right? Because all the signs that have happened before, like, it's supposed to make you stop and be like, oh my God, that's a lot to take in. But I mean, at the end of the day, there's a point that needs to be made, and it's a conversation that needs to be had amongst what we call Christians, right?
Right.
There's something about the fact that Sunday is the most segregated day of the week, and that's not what Jesus intended.
Right.
That's not why he came here. And that is not why he said, one, love me, and then love your neighbor, so when I see signs like that, I am disgusted by it. But I'm also disgusted by the fact that you've got a number of people sitting in position and they're manipulating minds and basically using their power and influence to basically tell people how to think. And if you get nothing from me on being on this podcast, it's time for us to start thinking for ourselves. It's time for us to actually start realizing what's happening within our communities. And a lot of that stems from the church. Like
Right.
everything about movements came from our churches. It came from our pulpits. And if we are not putting leaders in place, I go again to this, if we are not putting leaders in place that are actually leading us and wanting us to actually push further and to be better, then it says something about us.
Right.
And it's not just him. We can't blame him because we've allowed them to do it.
Right.
We've allowed them to do it. So, when I see communities and they have been basically, left abandoned, and there are churches on every single corner, what are we doing to help within our own communities, right?
Right.
What are we doing to help within our own communities? And I know, historically, we've, resources have left our communities, and pastors are not full-time pastors anymore. Pastors are actually working jobs now and pastoring.
Right.
So it's a completely different feel. But what? That is not all on him. What are we doing?
You're right. You're right.
So when and even talking about the church that is moving to this other side of town, when it comes down to it, if you're going to move to that side of town, first of all, don't come in just expecting people to accept you. I feel like that's backwards. If anything, you need to be having conversations with the residents that live in that area and trying to figure out, what is it? How can I really serve you and be a servant to you? And not in a way that's belittling, but how can I serve you for real? What can I do for you? And in turn, they'll realize that more or less the people in that community, the culture that's within that community, will actually do more of a service to them.
Right. I'm with you 100%. You hit the nail on the head. Head.
I mean, but a lot of that comes down to communication, and all of it comes down to leadership.
Communication and
Who
humility.
are we following?
Communication
humility.
and humility.
Who are we following? Why are you following them?
If you can't answer that question, then you probably shouldn't be there.
Right.
That's reality. Well, Tooty, I want to thank you for stopping by.
Real. Thank you. Oh my God.
Make sure you keep your black ass at them white churches.
Yeah.
And to close out tonight's show, we're gonna have actually a group that we played before on the show, Club Monsta, out of Birmingham, which is where this sign was. They got a song called Ain't Sanctified off their new album called When Gawd Ready. No, this is not gospel rap. Listen to it. It's called Ain't Sanctified off When Gawd Ready. And I guess we'll catch y'all next week. Once again, thank you so much, Tooty. And we'll catch y'all later. Peace.
Peace out.
Just wanna surround me. Lord, please order my steps. I need your energy all around me. Yeah.
Though I walk through them valley daily, my inner thoughts. Sometimes I wake up without praying, my inner fault. I ain't the only one just honest, I'm a sinner lost. I guess I'm punished, guaranteed two things, my blackness and death is promised. Man on the corner holding that sign of rapture's coming. How you know maybe he just a prophet walking among us? Or maybe he just homeless, starving for salvation, Holy Spirit feed his hunger. Sometimes I disagree with even my own beliefs. If I ain't heard the voice of God, why I wanna hear your pastor speak? Tell me more about heaven and less about your prosperity. Tell me how you helping and blessing people in need. Even Jesus was critical of the Pharisees. I'm far from spiritual, just a brother that wanna believe. At night when we hit knees, somebody hearing you. Hope we make it above to the last interview.
Lord, please order my steps. My enemies just wanna surround me. Lord, please order my steps. Ooh, I need your energy all around me. Yeah.
shoulder cause I'm dozing off. Yeah, them scriptures and them verses blend together too. Had to move a little closer, get a second view. I was worried about that chick up in that second pew. Wrong feelings when you go into a place of worship. Past months, I was losing faith and facing burdens. Praying hard for that turnaround and make it certain. Keep your hope, here's your words, you can be a servant. My friends lost their lives young, but I can't let it go. I say their name in remembrance just to let them know. See, I was losing my grip, better yet losing my faith. Being so trapped with these feelings, needing room to escape. People couldn't relate, people feelings alike. Back against the wall like lineups of measuring height. Had me pushed to the limit, irreversible plight. I just hope what I'm wishing generates with the light.
Lord, please order my steps. Order my steps, Lord. My enemies just wanna surround me. Wanna surround me. Lord, please order my steps. Ooh, order my steps, Lord. I need your energy all around me. All around me. Yeah, though I walk through the shadow of death, I fear no one. I know that you're with me. Please order my steps. Oh. Ooh, order my steps, Lord. 'Cause I know that you're with